A reminder this morning that millions of Americans are not benefiting from the growing economy. New figures show 1 out of every 5 children in the U.S. now depends on food stamps. That is nearly twice as many children as before the recession.
We live in the most prosperous nation in the world. We are told things are getting better for the lower and middle class citizens, and there's nothing but sunshine for everyone. This is not the truth. 1 in 5 kids in this country rely on food stamps. 1 in 5 have a better chance of going hungry. And this in a nation where any trip to the grocery store reveals more food than some people could possibly imagine. It's time to start asking some very hard and difficult questions. She has been described as a completely average American with 2 kids and until recently 2 jobs. But her book and accounts are anything but average. Hand to Mouth, Living in Bootstrap America is the book. And it brings us up close and personal, what we're talking about today. Linda Tirado joins us on MidPoint. Linda, thanks so much for being here.
I'm happy to be back.
I am absolutely astounded when I see this. 16 million children live in families that receive food stamps, a number that almost doubled between 07 and 14. In light of what I just said, simple question, why?
I think it's a question of priorities. When we came out of the crash of 2008, we got so used to focusing on what the banks were doing and what the top was doing and how we were going to get the financial and fiscal economy in that section running again, that I think we kind of forgot that everybody else was going to need a little bit of help too. We just sort of assumed that if we fixed everything at the top, everything would just sort of naturally come together at the bottom. And as we're seeing, that generally isn't working out so well. So I think it's a question of priorities and a question of will.
Is that the thing that we need to start with this conversation, understanding that trickle down, while it seems to be really fun for people to hammer away at or to use in a political sense, but in this sense of food and money and kids, it doesn't work. It's never really worked until you get to the bottom and work up.
I think what people don't remember about trickle down is that for it to work, somebody's eventually got to decide that they have enough and start the overflow effect. And we're just not seeing that. It's a great idea. It's a great theory. It's just not working out so well. I think that what we need to remember is that we live in a society and that we really need to kind of be coming together and saying, okay, how do we create jobs broadly? Because that's good for everybody. How do we make sure that prices aren't rising above wages broadly? Because that's good for everybody. It's not necessarily a question of control, but a question of what policies are actually going to be helpful moving forward broadly. And I think that if we focus on the bottom instead of on the top for a little while, I mean, I'm not even saying forever, I'm just saying, maybe we've done it this way for long enough. It's time to focus on the other end, shore up the problems that we see there, and then we can kind of look to what we need to fix next. It's time for us to start focusing on the bottom because we've been neglecting it for long enough that it's starting to overtake the entire economy.
Is maybe one of the problems here too is that there's so many myths that are consistently being pushed out about this. And again, I've always told people you have to understand, you have to research, you got to look into things. As a matter of fact, this is from MediaMatters.org. This is Fox News, 3 food stamp myths in under 5 minutes. And I wanted you to just give me a quick comment on these as you hear these. Here's myth 1. Raising the minimum wage to reduce food stamp usage would create more unemployment. What do you think?
I think that that's absolutely true. If a company is going to cut wages or cut jobs to keep the same profit margin on their wages instead of making reasonable allowances in other sectors where they have profit. I mean, the thing is people look at wages as though that's the only cost of running business and that's the only expenditure there is. It isn't. You can make cuts in other places to make room for labor so that you have more customers so that eventually you don't have to make any cuts at all.
Here's something else. It says the rise in food stamp recipients is due to the collapse of traditional family life. That's kind of a broad statement to make.
Well, what they mean by that is people are, having kids and enjoying themselves and doing naughty things that they shouldn't before they have a marriage. And the truth is that single parent households only comprise something like, I want to say it's 19 or 26% of food stamp recipients. The vast majority of people on food stamps are either single folks with no children who just haven't been able to find work, or they're two-parent families with children. But, to demonize that and say, well, it's really down to personal decision and it's all down to people, not having their lives in order before they have children, the numbers really don't show that out.
All right, and here's the last one. The Obama administration is needlessly encouraging college students and quote-unquote potential immigrants to utilize food stamp benefits?
Well, for one, it's impossible for an immigrant person that isn't, doesn't have the right paperwork to be able to get those benefits to get those benefits. Those programs have policies and checks. Trust me, you have got to prove that you are a citizen to get food stamps. And secondly, I don't know what they mean by encourage college students. If we're talking to people and saying, well, look, what you need to do is bootstrap yourself out of your poverty, but definitely don't go to college because that's a terrible way to do it. Instead, you should get a job. Of course, there aren't any jobs, and we know that, and the jobs that you can get when you haven't gone to college are basically, entry-level service industry kind of jobs. But, go ahead and do the bootstrapping. I think what we should be doing is encouraging people who have the intelligence and ambition and opportunity to go to college. And if we've got to help them out with food for a couple of months at one time so that they can focus on their finals, that broadly helps the American economy. So the amount of money you're going to pay to a college student in food stamps, and you're talking like $100 a month probably at best for most of them, the amount that we as a society get back in return for that expenditure is exponential. So I think the question really is, why are we nickel and diming ourselves to death when we can see the effects of that? I mean, Greece has austerity, and look at what's going on there. This is not tenable. It's not working anywhere in the world, and it certainly isn't working in America. So again, I think it's just time to kind of refocus and say, okay, what's working, what's not, and what could we do differently?
Less than a minute left. What is the first thing that needs to happen now in Washington to at least start to cure this?
They've got to start actually caring instead of talking in circles. We hear about the middle class, we hear about the wealthy, we very rarely hear about the poor, and when we do, it's not from people who are actually holding down two jobs themselves. It's, some fairly wealthy person's idea of what that person might think. If they get people involved that actually have jobs, that are actually working, that have these lives, then they would know what is going wrong and how to fix it.
There is absolutely no excuse for a child in America to go to bed hungry any night, any time, no matter what. That's a tragedy in this country. It's insulting in so many ways. I want to remind everybody that the book, once again, is Hand to Mouth, Living in Bootstrap America. It will give you an idea of what it's really like out there, and this is something our lawmakers need to focus on. The kids themselves should not be made to suffer simply because of some sort of political agenda. Linda, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
And you, thank you.
All right, take care. From being fired for making anti-gay comments in emails to suing those who put other kids in danger with their decision about vaccinations. We'll cover it all from the legal lay of the land when we return right here on MidPoint, where every day we question everything.